This is ContraZoom,
where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho.
It is my birthday this week, so we are going to talk about things that I want to talk about. Not that this show isn't always what I want to talk about, but especially so this week. Wouldn't you agree, Rachel?
What an intro. What a way to set the tone for it's my birthday and we're doing what I want to do because I am like 5 years old with the
100%.
podcast.
So for the past few years, I have done interesting lists talking about my favorite movies. You can go back to episode 199, Best Films by Genre, where I picked 10 movies and named a favorite from each genre. Or episode 157, Best Films Through the Decades, where I picked my favorite movie from every decade going back to the 1920s. And episode 114, 30 Films in 30 Years, where I name my favorite movie from every year that I've been alive. Before we get started, I'd love it if you haven't already rated and reviewed us in your podcatcher of choice. And I'll only take a moment to do that, and it really helps us to grow and find new listeners. Now, for the last 2 years, Bill Antonio has been the guest going through these fun lists, but he is currently on vacation to the motherland because he's not been feeling enough guilt or something lately. I don't know. So subbing in is Rachel, the show's regular co-host. So thanks, Rachel, for continuing to be on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I had fun writing that sassy intro.
It's very sassy and very like are you one of those people that's like, it's my birthday month?
No.
Do you do birthday week? Kind of sounds like it.
It ends up usually happening that way because, like, I'll do something with my wife, and then my family wants to do something, and then do something with my friends, and then inevitably that ends up being like over the course of like 2 weekends or something like that. So I feel like I'm nonstop sort of celebrating, even though I'm not a big fan of my birthday, regardless. So
yeah, I'm not a big birthday person either. So my brother and I have the same birthday. We're not twins, but we have the same birthday. So for me, birthdays were always a family thing more than a friend thing. It was just like my brother and I, and then our parents, we would do something on the day of. So, and very, very rarely did either of us. I think by the time I was 10, I think I stopped having birthday parties. I was very antisocial even back then. But yeah, I've never been a big birthday person. And anytime somebody goes to me, it's like my birthday month. Sorry, that was my white girl voice. So I'm not trying to generalize that. It's a certain group of people who like to do it. I mean, all the power to you. Celebrate things if you want to celebrate them, because the world can be bleak, so why not celebrate your birthday?
Right? Celebrate you. That's what we're saying here today. Celebrate you. And today we're celebrating me in a roundabout way. But today's list is going to be a fun one. We are going to name our favorite films by language. The criteria was a little tricky to figure out as I want to cover a wide region of movies, but some places don't produce as many movies as others. So first off, we exclude English language movies as we talk about them all the time. It likely would just be naming our favorite movie anyways at that point. After that, I looked at what countries produce the most movies per year. Obviously, you likely know the ones you expect to show up at the top, but just picking the top 10 doesn't give us enough diversity, so I made some groupings to help us out. We have 4 specific languages, 1 country that has 2 languages, 2 regions, and 3 wildcards. The only rules were for our region or wildcard picks. You can't pick a French film for the European wildcard, since we'll already be naming our favorite French films and we want to spread the love. Things will make more sense as we go on. Trust me, I'll explain it as each time it comes up. And I've also removed the ability to name movies that I have picked on any of the previous 3 birthday lists mentioned earlier, and I will call them out when they were in conflict. I know this is a big preamble, but Rachel, how did you find this exercise? Was it a tricky one to narrow down favorites or tough to find picks for some slots?
So I've been joking with Dakota that my list is like the most basic, uninspired list, and any kind of film bro or faux cinemaphile would just be like, yeah, these are my favorites. But I actually really enjoyed it, and it made me realize, if anything, that there are certain languages in certain parts of the world that I do not watch enough movies from. And I always think, like, because I always hear people talk about, like, oh, you got to get into world cinema and all that. It's not easy, though. Oddly enough, I find, like, even with as much streaming as we have available to us, sometimes it's just not easy to know which movies are the ones to watch. And, like, I mean, you could just take a gamble, like, who cares kind of thing. But I find a lot of, especially when you're talking classic movies, so for instance, like Persian classic movies from say like the 50s. They're not the easiest ones to get a hold of these days. And I wish it was easier, but you do have things like Criterion and Mubi and, those kind of bougie streaming services that both of us have subscriptions to, actually. So, but I did enjoy it. I did enjoy this exercise. I thought it was interesting at the very least to say to myself, like, I need to go and expand on certain parts of the world a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think I sort of realized that too, where, I don't consider myself a super expert in non-English language cinema, but like, I have a diverse enough base, but then you sort of try narrowing it down and you realize, oh, I've only seen 3 Polish movies. I thought I knew a bit about Polish cinema. Well, I know like the big names and stuff like that, but it's not like I've seen a ton. I'm using that as an example. I don't know how many Polish movies I've seen, not a ton. But yeah, it was sort of like that, where once you actually like narrow it down by language, you may cast a wide net and watch a lot from a whole bunch of different regions in different countries. But like when you actually look at it and be like, how many Portuguese movies have you seen? And it's like, oh, I don't know, maybe only like 1 or 2 sort of thing. So it was just really tricky to sort of narrow it down. And that's why I feel doing the latter half of this of doing regions or wild cards sort of helped out, because we could be like, okay, so now I can pick from 20 different languages of what's my favorite movie, as opposed to picking the one movie from this one language I've seen and automatically defaulting it as the best.
Did you find that you were going for more recent I mean, like, eventually I'm going to hear your list, but like, were you gravitating more towards more contemporary films, or were you looking at the classics?
It's sort of funny where like I look at my list, and as we get to it, it's basically split in half, where like half of the list is movies that have basically come out in the last 10 to 15 years, and the other half of the list is like from like the 50s to the 70s.
Yeah. I suppose that's kind of because when you start to look outside of Hollywood or Canada and probably British cinema, I would say, I think I would include that as well, because we have pretty good access to those 3 regions, probably the most of any. I feel like once you start branching out to other parts of the world, the first things you do watch are like for Italy, for example, like 8.5 is probably going to be the first stop for most people. If you want to watch an Italian film. So it's interesting. Like, you would go back to the classic ones, but then at the same time, something that might get your interest is probably a new movie that came out at TIFF or at some film festival or something like that. And then that's what sparks your interest into a particular country. That happened to me, actually. I'm not spoiling anything here. It's a couple years ago when I kept coming across South African films for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was just like movie after movie that I was really enjoying them, and they all happened to come from South Africa or from South African directors. And that was really neat. And like which prompted me to look into their history in terms of cinema and their movie industry, and what's been coming out in the past and what comes out now. So that's always kind of fun. So also, anybody listening, if you guys have any suggestions for movies that Dakota and I do not mention, please send them onwards, because I'm always looking for new movies to watch from around the world.
100%. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'm going to make a joke at the end of all this. And like, Bill probably has an amazing list. So like,
yeah, his list would be really good.
Yeah. So like, send us your picks of which ones we're missing or things like that. Is it a movie we maybe have seen and aren't as high on, or is it one that we just haven't seen at all? Like, let us know, sort of thing. It'd be very interesting to sort of see everyone's picks. And I'm also sort of interested because I also feel like, because I was born in Canada, both my parents are white, and I only speak English. So that was sort of what I was exposed to growing up. And I wonder if you, Rachel, are going to have a bit of a different experience because you maybe grew up with more Cantonese media. And so your probably base there is a lot bigger than comparatively to me for all of them. And it would be sort of similar with like a Spanish person, that would they be exposed to more Spanish media, and, different, like a Swedish person, more Swedish media, all that sort of stuff, where I'm very curious to sort of see where people come from with what sort of movies in media they would name themselves.
I mean, I agree with that. I think obviously if from a young age, it's like you just kind of around parents and aunts and uncles who are watching movies from like quote unquote the motherland. It's interesting because those are just like, I don't think about it. Those are just the movies that I grew up with. But I also think that if you grew up watching films so English is my first language through and through. I wouldn't even say I speak Cantonese fluently. I can understand it all right, but like I do, if I spoke it, actual Cantonese speakers know that I speak it kind of funny. So for me, it's very much so a second language, and English is by far and away my most dominant language, that the only one that I really have a firm grasp of. And even then, sometimes it's not that firm. But I find that if you grew up in a household where you were watching media that wasn't your first language, and you understood and things like that, you don't really have that hump that I've noticed some people do of saying like, well, it's in English, like it's not in English, I don't understand it. Yeah. It's not in my language, so I don't understand it. Whereas I think that you tend to be a bit more open to it, I suppose, just simply because like you grew up watching movies that weren't in your dominant language and they were just around. So you don't really think of that as necessarily being the hump that you have to make, or like the obstacle that you have to get over, because it's just another thing. So I wonder if that plays a bit of, has a bit of an effect on people, whether or not they even gravitate towards movies that aren't their dominant language.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. All right, let us get into our list. So as I said at the top, we're going to start with 4 specific languages. And of course, just because we're picking a language does not mean that needs to come from the originating country. And we're going to see if that sort of lines up with anything. I think the second language is really going to be interesting to see where we go with that. But the first one up we have is a French language movie. So Rachel, we're also both going to pick a runner-up and then our actual pick. So Rachel, what is your picks for French language movies?
So this... I initially wasn't going to pick up, but it's actually become a little bit, unfortunately, topical, particularly in Ontario. So I went with Polytechnique, which is directed by Denis Villeneuve. It's not just French. There's a bit of English in this movie as well. For people who are in Canada, you're probably very familiar with Polytechnique. It was at the time, and I actually still think it is the biggest school shooting anyways that had happened in Canada. And this was at Dawson College in Montreal, or was it Montreal? I want to say Montreal. Yeah. In the early 90s. The reason that I thought about it was because unfortunately there was a stabbing at University of Waterloo. I want to say last week. Like it happened very, very recently. And like Polytechnique, both of those attacks were gender-based. So in Polytechnique, it was a man who was upset that there were females enrolled in the engineering program. I'm kind of distilling it down to its very basic thing, but it's a very, very moving film for Canadians, but for anybody around the world. And Denis Villeneuve is, I've said it many, many times on this podcast, one of my favorite directors. It's certainly my favorite director working today, and this is probably one of, if not my favorite movie from him. And it's for anybody who isn't familiar with what happened, it's a very good kind of primer into that as well. And my runner-up is a French movie that I actually recently caught on Netflix not that long ago. So there's a bit of recency bias here. And it's called I Lost My Body. And it's by Jeremy Clapin. And it's so good. It's very different to Polytechnique. It's not as much of a downer. It's kind of a bit of a fantasy movie, but the animation is stunning. And it's a gorgeous movie.
Yeah, I have not seen Polytechnique. It's very, very high on my list of ones I need to.
Have you not seen it? Oh, no, wow. I'm surprised. I'm very surprised.
I'm lacking on my Villeneuve French movies for the most part. But I will second the I Lost My Body recommendation. I remember when that came out, it was nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Oscars, and a lot of people had hoped that it would win because it is a stunning movie. For people that don't know it, I'll just very briefly summarize it. It's literally about a guy who loses his hand, and his hand tries to find his way back to the body. And that is it. So it kind of has a bit of a horror aspect to it at times. It's a thriller. It's a comedy. It's a very moving drama. Yeah. It's a fantasy. It's kind of a whole bunch of genres crammed in together, and it works beautifully.
and it looks stunning. Like just the animation alone is just so beautiful. And I love watching great animation. So yeah, those are my two French picks. How about you?
Great choices. Okay, so I'm going to start with my runners up. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Alphaville, which is the Jean-Luc Godard movie. Oh, I guess I need to first say French has two movies I cannot pick, which is Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which I named as the best romance film, and Rafifi, which I named as the best crime film. So those two movies are ineligible for me for this. I know I said I'm putting these measures on myself, the limitations, and this is coming into play.
Okay.
So Alphaville, first one, it's a futuristic noir movie that isn't shot with any sort of actual futurism, really. It's sort of interesting. They talk about flying spaceships and all this sort of stuff. In reality, they're just driving cars, and you see that. So it's really interesting that they take this sci-fi dialogue and talk about this advanced technology, but in reality, it is just, everyday stuff. Great stuff by Godard. But my actual pick, I too did not go with a France film. I picked a Quebecois film, and that is another Denis Villeneuve movie, and that is Incendie, which I could have picked this for a few different languages, but it is mostly in French, but it is also in Arabic and in English as well. So I am kind of, just nuzzling it right in here as my French pick. Absolutely stunning movie. If you don't know this one, this was his last non-English movie before he completely switched over to only English movies. And it is about a brother and a sister who, after their mother dies, they receive two notes from their mother's lawyer, from her, I guess, will. And that was, one of them says, you have a brother you don't know, go find him. And then the other one says, you've never met your father, go find him. And so it's about how this brother and sister have to travel back to the unnamed country of their mother's homeland that speaks Arabic to meet their brother and find out who their father is, and the really, really sad, depressing thriller that ensues. Have you seen Incendie?
I have. It's up there. I feel like I have a lot of favorite Denis Villeneuve movies. But that's one that, time and time again, when you talk about him as a director, you can't not talk about Incendie. I think you can get away with not talking about Polytechnique, but to me, you can't do like a profile on him and not mention Incendie. Like it's such a great movie in that it is very disturbing and very unsettling in many, many different ways. And it's just it's stunning, like storytelling, and it's not his last Canadian movie, right? Because Enemy is a Canadian movie.
Yes.
But yeah, these are we talked about this. I can't remember which episode, but we were talking about like it would be nice to see Denis Villeneuve kind of go back to doing movies like this, like a Polytechnique, like a Incendie, because he's so good when he has. He's great when he has an endless budget and the world is his playground kind of thing. But when he has constraints on him and when he's a bit more micro focused, I think his directorships is bar none. Like there's no director I love more than Denis Villeneuve when he is just doing something small and French as well. Like it's obviously comes very natural to him being, a Quebecois person himself. But yeah, it's incredible. Incendie it's an incredible, and it's one of those movies too that you hear a lot about. And so when you go into it, you go, well, there's no way it can match up to all the expectation that's behind it. But I don't know anybody who has watched it, even like recently for the first time, and has come away being like, oh, that was a bit overhyped.
Yeah.
It's like, it's always good. Like everybody will come away being like, that's a goddamn movie. That's a damn movie.
I think it's one of the few movies that will still have the ability to make someone gasp when it gets to the reveals. Yeah.
And so I think I've only watched it the one time because I didn't really have much desire to revisit it, but it's one of those that it's like, I don't know if you can really see it coming. You know, sometimes you see like the plot twist, like you can see it coming. And maybe on a second watch I'm sure he put in, you know, a few breadcrumbs here and there that tell you where it's going to end up eventually. But on first watch, I definitely wasn't expecting that. And not to say that like I'm so good at determining plot twists or anything like that, but I just, it's a very, very stunning film. And I certainly put it up as like one of the crown jewels of his career, if not the crown jewel.
100%. Okay, let us move on to Spanish language movies. And this is where it's going to get interesting as far as where these movies come from. So, Rachel, what are your picks for Spanish language movies?
So my runner-up is The Mole Agent, which is a doc that when it was nominated for the Oscars. I didn't end up getting a chance to watch it just because I ran out of time, I suppose. And then I caught up with it later because everyone just kept talking about it. And I was like, oh, it's great. It is such a good movie. And I was so not disappointed that I didn't watch it earlier, because who cares? Watch it when you can watch it. But it is excellent, and I would recommend anybody watch it. But my actual pick is it's really basic, but it is Pan's Labyrinth, because I love Guillermo del Toro. I think that he does horror in a way that I don't even want to say it's like Hitchcock, because it's not, but it's Hitchcockian and yet his own thing as well. And he has a way of mixing his own culture and his own vibe into it that is very seamless to me. And Pan's Labyrinth, if you haven't seen it already, it's I always say it's kind of like a gothic fairy tale, fantasy, horror-y kind of movie. And it takes place after the Spanish Civil War. And it's during the Franco period in Spain. And it's about a little girl. And I remember the first time watching it and just being really blown away by the set pieces, by the story, how simple but yet not simple it was at the same time, how elaborate everything looked, but yet everything kind of seemed, again, simple in its own way. And yeah, Del Toro, for me, I will watch anything that he does. Him and Denis Villeneuve kind of live on a very similar plane to me, that I will watch anything that they do. And I really love his style in particular, because I think nobody does gothic horror the way that Guillermo del Toro does gothic horror.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. Those are two very good picks. And yeah, you went with Argentina and Mexico there, which, you know, once again shows the range that we had to go with for Spanish language cinema, which is really nice to see that we can pick so many different countries to pick from. But yeah, The Mole Agent is a really fun, cute documentary about an old man who gets hired to go undercover in a nursing home to see if they are abusing patients or not. And it turns into this investigative journalism movie into a sweet romantic comedy almost. It's very unique and very interesting, and definitely worth a watch.
Definitely. I also just want to point out that the only reason that Spanish is all over the place is just because they were very big colonizers.
Yes.
So
same with France as well. We could have,
just gonna put that out there. Yeah. That's the only reason.
Yeah, we could have, for France, we could have picked, African countries or things like that. Or Spain, same deal. But yes, so my picks are, my runner-up is Pain and Glory, which is the Pedro Almodovar movie. So coming out of Spain a few years ago, the Antonio Banderas film, where he's basically playing a version of Almodovar, about playing a film director, kind of looking at his past and present and future and all that sort of stuff as he's going through health issues. Beautiful, beautiful movie. Well-deserved Oscar nomination for Banderas. But then my actual pick, Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It is an absolutely stunning film. This, Spanish language movies had a whole bunch of movies we could have chosen, and I don't think it's a surprise that we both picked the same one for all the reasons that you highlighted. It is an absolutely incredible movie. It was my first Del Toro that I saw, and I went and saw it in theaters. Yeah, and it's just like, you watch this movie unfold and you're like, I didn't know you could make movies like this. And it's just so stunningly beautiful and scary and thrilling and funny and heartfelt and all those sort of things that you want to feel from a movie. And he absolutely does it.
And I find with Pan's Labyrinth in particular, so I didn't watch it in theater. I watched it on my little dinky laptop many, many years ago. But you just get sucked into it. Like nothing mattered to me around what was going on. I think I was meant to be studying, and I think I watched it at the library. And I didn't care. Like I just sat there and I just watched, and you really get lost into the story and into the world that he creates. And he's done a lot of great stuff since. I think that he's like I said, nobody does gothic horror like Guillermo del Toro. And I mean, even his Pacific Rim is great. Like he's done really great movies, but for me, I don't know if he will ever top Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, same.
Because it's so good. It's such a perfect movie. And it's one of those movies that I watched and I just thought, how did it take me so long to watch this? Even though I don't think I was that far off from watching it from its release, but I didn't watch it. I know I didn't watch it in theaters. I never have, and I wish I could, because I think that's a great theater movie, actually.
Yeah, and I think it also helps that Del Toro is one of the few people who still insists on doing as much practical effects as possible, sort of in the tier of Christopher Nolan, where obviously they work in different realms, where Nolan's about, I want my explosions to be real, whereas Del Toro is, I want my monsters to be real.
He came to Toronto, so he loves Toronto. Loves this. Like he has I don't know if he still does, but I know he had a place here for a really long time. And he came to Toronto when the Pinocchio came out, and he did like a little Q&A, and he was talking about, it's like you can watch all of these things on YouTube as well. Like he's done so many interviews, just the painstaking effort he went into with his co-director of making the little puppet for Pinocchio, and then like each little thing, and it's like just the attention to detail is mind blowing, because he could have easily done that on computer. And not to say that that's not difficult and that doesn't take time and a certain type of artistry, but the way he was describing it was just like, you're a madman. Like only somebody who's a little bit off, like you have to be a little bit off to do that to yourself, because the effort that he puts into his films is, I think, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I saw him when he came to TIFF one year when, what was that haunted house movie? Crimson Peak was coming out. And so he did a series on Gothic horror at TIFF. And so I watched him speak about Rebecca, and then they did a showing of it. And that was one of the earliest
too, isn't he? He's so passionate about these things.
It was one of the earliest podcasts that Andres and I did, was covering Del Toro at TIFF. And then we reviewed Rebecca as well.
Yeah, he's like, that's, I think the other thing is there are certain filmmakers that you can feel how much they love movies, like just as much as we love movies. And it's not really just like, not to say it's bad if it's only your artistic expression, but like there's something else behind it as well. And there's a real reverence for all the people that came before him. Even that TV show that he did, that anthology show that he did, that I really, really loved. That was so Hitchcockian. Like he tore pages out of Alfred Hitchcock's book to do those. And I think I love him. I love him and Denis, and I wish they would. I wonder if they hang out. I feel like they probably know each other. I'm sure they do.
I imagine once you're in that circle, once you're at that level, the circles are very small.
I feel like they would be fun to hang out with. I feel like they're very different people, though.
Yes. I would love to hang out with Del Toro. Did you ever go see his exhibit that they had? What was it, at the AGO or something like that?
No.
It is so good. Oh my God.
I don't even want to talk about it. I'm supposed to go. And this is like, I had like twice somebody, I won't name who, they were like, yeah, no, wait for me. I'm going to go. And so I didn't go. And then, cause I was like, I'm perfectly happy going by myself, cause I just wanted to see it, cause it sounded amazing. And this person was like, no, wait for me. I want to go. Never went. And then it was the last day and I was very upset. But anyways, I don't want to talk about this anymore.
All right, let us move on to our next language, which is Italian. And so, unlike French and Spanish, there's a little less colonization going on with Italy.
We're not successful in that realm.
Yep. They had their own issues. We won't talk about that. But yeah, what are your favorite Italian movies, Rachel?
Are we going to talk about like the colonizing history of every like section that we go through now.
Maybe it might have
such a downer. I'm like looking at the next language up, and I'm like, we should talk about that.
Okay.
Anyways, okay. So my runner-up for Italian is a movie that I only saw last year, but I really loved it, and it had been on my list of like my to watch list for ages, and I'm probably going to pronounce it incorrectly, but Umberto D is the English pronunciation, and it's kind of very depressingly a movie that is right up my street. It is effectively, it's about an old man who has a very cute dog, and he is trying to live in Rome off of his pension and struggling to do so. That's the movie. That's the entire movie, and it's quite sad in its own way, but it's very, very moving. And I think, and it takes place in I want to say 50s Rome, and it's a real window into what that country and that city in particular was going through post-war. And I don't know, it's very simple storytelling, but it truly is a beautiful movie, but not like a happy-go-lucky kind of film. My actual pick is, again, quite a basic pick, but it's La Dolce Vita, which is by the obviously incredible Federico Fellini. And I love 8.5. I think that's a great movie from him, and I understand why that's typically the number one movie when people talk about Fellini, but I've always had a real soft spot for La Dolce Vita since I saw it, because I just love the way it unfolds. I think that it's so excessive in its own way, but every part of that is very necessary. And it's about a tabloid journalist, and it follows that journalist over 7 days. And it's broken up into different episodes, and there's like an intermission in the middle, and there's an epilogue, and the way it's all sort of, and it's just kind of going through his life. And I love it. And I know you just recently watched this.
It is very true. I did just watch it. Do you want me to reveal my?
Oh, is this your pick as well?
It is not my main pick. It is my runner-up.
Okay.
So,
it made it into your runner-up though, and like you just thought that's good because it's a great movie. Like, so you've seen 8.5, right?
I have, yes.
We've talked about that. Between the two, I've always struggled with this. Which one do you think is the better movie? Not the one that you liked more, but like just the better movie.
I would definitely say La Dolce Vita is better.
Really?
Yes, and I liked it more as well.
I always thought 8.5 was kind of like the better made movie, but when I say better made, I mean I'm talking like millimeters of a difference there. Mm-hmm. Like the margins is very, very small, but I've always really loved La Dolce Vita, and I think it is definitely my favorite of his. So that's your runner-up. What's your actual pick then?
So I also have to disclude The Great Beauty, which in my 30 films in 30 years list was my 2013 pick. Okay. Love that movie. But my actual pick was Bicycle Thieves, which kind of ties in with your runner-up, Umberto D. You didn't say the director, but it was directed by Vittorio De Sica, who directed Bicycle Thieves as well. And it sort of explores similar-ish themes. I haven't seen Umberto D, but I am familiar with it, where it once again takes place in post-war Italy. And it's literally about how this man who gets a job plastering posters around this city, needs his bicycle to be able to go around to the different parts of the city, has his bicycle stolen. And so the rest of the movie is him just trying to track down the bicycle thieves that stole his bike, where him and his young son are trying to look for it. And it sort of highlights the class differences in Italy and the lack of money a lot of people had as the country was trying to rebuild itself. A whole bunch of different stuff. And then, of course, once you get into the neorealism that Vittorio De Sica was famous for, the leader of that movement, especially in the Italian neorealism, and you get these non-actors giving performances where at times they feel very monotone and flat, but then, other times, because they are, really invested in these moments, you get these real, honest, heartbreaking moments of truth that it seems like you can't get with professional actors at times. And when you get that magic, it really is that magic. And so I saw this movie years ago. I was visiting my friend Sebastian in Halifax. He was going to school out there, and he's like, "Oh, hey, the student center is playing this Italian movie. You want to go see it?" So we went to the movie theater and on campus at Dalhousie, and I saw this, and I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I've never heard of this movie, or I know nothing about it." And it just absolutely floored me.
I haven't seen it. I've heard of it. I've heard many, many good things about it, but I haven't seen it yet. Maybe I will watch it this weekend, actually.
If you like Umberto D, you'll probably like this.
Yeah. The thing I like about, like, you know, De Sica as a director is it's like, we both kind of describe such a simple premise. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very, very simple and just very, like, it's about this guy, and this is a thing that he's going through in his life. Yep. And obviously, you know, an Umberto D going through something like trying to keep a roof over your head is a big deal. Like, I'm not trying to oversimplify that, but the way that it's kind of presented is a very simple story, but he dives into so many different issues. And I suppose that kind of just comes from the time period where mm-hmm. there was a lot going on in the country and amongst the people. And it wasn't easy for people back then. I mean, you know, you could argue it's still not easy for people, but really, really back then, it really wasn't easy. And so it was just ripe for a lot of different types of commentary and art to be made. And I think he did that pretty brilliantly.
Yeah, absolutely. He did an American movie produced by David O. Selznick, and we mm-hmm. did a podcast episode on that as well, because it was called two different things. It was called Terminal Station and Indiscretion of an American Wife. And what had happened was De Sica... I guess Selznick was very interested in doing an Italian neorealism, but in Hollywood. And so he hired De Sica to do it. And he's like, great, you can make your own Italian neorealism movie. Just do it in English. He goes, sounds great. I'll do that. And so he did this movie that's very similar to the other ones they've made. And Selznick was like, oh man, this movie's boring. I need to cut a whole bunch out. So we basically took an hour and a half movie and cut it down to an hour and released it under a different title. And so we did a make-remake. It was one of the first make-remakes that we did. Stephanie and I did it, comparing the two, because they're both available on YouTube and you can watch both of them. And it's shocking how different of a movie half an hour can make. And it's not like he removed major plot points. It's just taking out all the silence and all the quiet moments that De Sica was famous for, and you get a completely different movie.
You gotta wonder sometimes, like, when they hire a director like De Sica and they come in, then they go, well, we're going to take what makes you special and what people have loved about you, and we're going to we're going to remove that from the movie. But we would like you to make a movie for us, but it's not going to be your movie, kind of thing. That always really shocks me when that happens. But yeah, I mean, editing is, I think, one of probably the most underrated parts of filmmaking. I would say it's like part of the more underappreciated areas that go into making a movie, and it can make all the difference. Like, I think it's, what was the one? It was a YouTube video, some fan video that somebody made about that movie, Passenger? No.
Oh yeah, the Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, that one with Chris Pratt. And they just were like, just reorder the movie. And I was like, holy shit, like that's fascinating. And I think I've never seen that one either. And like, I should probably, because I have heard of that. I think maybe you told me about it. Probably, yeah. Before
there's a great YouTube video. I think it was Kogonada made a YouTube essay video, or someone like him. No, maybe it was the discarded image. I'll link to that in the show notes, because it's very, very interesting to sort of see what it was, where I basically summarized it. But yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. That's like a very interesting case study.
All right, let us move to our next language. And, we've been talking a lot about the history of colonization and languages and stuff like that. Is there anything you want to
bypass? No, let's bypass this one.
Okay, cool.
It's Japanese, and let's just move forward.
What are your picks, Rachel?
My runner-up is Battle Royale. I flipping love that. And I love the book as well. It is like the most gnarly of things. And Americans have tried to kind of take the concept of Battle Royale, which is effectively, it's like the Hunger Games, but not. It's like, I mean, Hunger Games was very much so inspired by Battle Royale, but it's about, high school students who are forced to fight to the death by their government. And it's just wild. And when it came out, I believe there was like a lot of controversy around it. Even for Japan, who are like they can be quite whimsical people when it comes to like storytelling. And if you haven't seen Battle Royale, it's probably one of the more well-known, I would say, especially amongst our generation, because it came out at a pretty good time for our age group to watch something like that. And yeah, it's absolutely incredible. But my actual pick, again, very basic bitch kind of pick, but it's Rashomon, and it's directed by Akira Kurosawa. I love this movie. I have watched it many, many times over now, and I love the idea of it's the same story told by different perspectives. And anytime that I had seen that in a Hollywood movie growing up, I remember thinking this is the most brilliant thing in the world. Like, this filmmaker is an absolute genius. Like, how did they come up with doing something like this? And then, as I got older, you realize actually everybody is just copying this one movie to the point that it's called like the Rashomon thing. Like, it's like, oh, it's a Rashomon type movie. That's what people say. So it's, that if you don't know what Rashomon is about, it's about someone who gets raped, basically. And it's just telling that story through and through. And the most recent Hollywood kind of example of that was, I'm blanking on the name now. What was that? Is Ben Affleck and Matt Damon.
The Last Duel.
The Last Duel, which I love that movie. I thought it was a really, really well done movie. Yeah. And that's effectively Rashomon. It's an incredible movie.
Yes, I agree with Rashomon. I like it. I don't love it as much as other Kurosawa movies. I feel like I need to revisit. I think it was the second one of his I watched, and now I'm more on his wavelength and need to go back to it. But yeah, it's really great. And it always reminds me of that great Simpsons joke of where Marge is like, you loved Rashomon, and Homer's like, I don't remember it that way.
Come on, Homer. Japan will be fun. You like Rashomon?
That's not how I remember it.
That's such a great, like, the epitome of a Simpsons joke where it's actually quite clever, but sometimes they dumb it down and make it look like, especially when it comes out of Homer's mouth, it's just kind of stupid. But yeah, it's very, very funny.
Yeah. I haven't seen Battle Royale, surprisingly.
What?
I know. Yeah, it definitely seems like something that would be up my alley, and I've never gotten around to watching it. It's on my list.
Have you seen Hunger Games?
I have not.
Oh, okay. Have you read Hunger Games?
I have not.
Yeah. I mean, just watch Battle Royale. You're not missing anything with Hunger Games.
Yeah.
It's very, very good. Highly recommend.
Yeah. I do need to watch it. Okay, so first off, I need to exclude Seven Samurai because I picked it as my favorite action movie of all time. So that is not there. That is obviously the premier Kurosawa for me. But my runner-up is Tokyo Story, which is the Yasujiro Ozu movie. Very much similar to our talking about Bicycle Thieves in Umberto D. It is a very naturalistic movie about an older couple who visit their children and grandchildren in the city, but are sort of ignored and are kind of left to their own devices. And it's just about how you feel guilty for your parents getting older. That's basically what the movie is. But my actual pick is Harikiri, which is a Masaki Kobayashi movie about a samurai who goes to a warlord, a castle. He goes there, and he goes and tells them that he wishes to commit suicide. But first, before he commits suicide, he wishes to tell his story. And this is a kind of movie that's a little hard to explain, and you don't really want to give lots away. But basically, he starts revealing a story about why he's committing suicide, about all the tragedy that has befallen his family, and how he's lost everything and everyone he loves, and his whole life. And you realize that the people that he is telling the story to maybe have a bit more involvement than we are led to believe at the beginning of the movie. Is this one that you've seen, Rachel?
I haven't. No, I haven't seen it.
It's a good one.
Heard many, many things about it, but yeah, haven't seen it. I actually kind of not oddly, I suppose. I don't know why. I would say oddly, but I don't watch that much Japanese cinema. It's probably only been in the last few years or so. I mean, Kurosawa, I think, was the only one, and then like the Studio Ghibli stuff. But other than that, I never really got too into Japanese cinema, and this is one of those ones that I was like, oh, all of my choices are like the movies that I was considering for this one. I was like, it's mostly Kurosawa, or it was a Studio Ghibli pick. And I was like, there's a lot more there's a lot more out there. I know there is. And I should really watch it, because those Japanese cinema, I think, similar to French and Italian cinema, they've had a huge impact on Hollywood movies. More than I think some people really realize, that a lot of movies that are made and do quite well over here, they kind of are very much so, quote unquote, inspired by films that were made by Kurosawa and other directors like that.
Yeah. Well, it was like, the old story of like, Kurosawa decided to start making movies because he fell in love with John Ford movies, and John Ford saw Kurosawa movies. It was like, we need to do this over here. And then basically every director copied what was the Ford style, but was actually the Kurosawa style. And, you can look at every movie that came out in the 60s and was like, oh, this is, just their version of Seven Samurai or Rashomon or, The Hidden Fortress or whatever it is, because that's how influential Kurosawa and people like Kobayashi and Ozu and stuff like that were at the time.
Yeah. And a really rich history of cinema history of in Japan. Like, it's pretty incredible, the movies that they've come out with, and all the different, I suppose, like threads that have come out from them. When they talk like in NFL, like the coaching tree, they're like, that's kind of what I think about. I don't know why I'm thinking about that right now. I clearly just want to watch football, I guess.
we were talking about sports before we started recording, so that's probably why. Okay. So the next language is one that is going to be coming mostly from China. You can either pick a Cantonese language movie or a Mandarin language movie. So Rachel, I'm totally gonna guess what language you're gonna go with, but what are your picks?
Well, I'm going with two movies that are from Hong Kong, and the first, my runner-up, is quite a classic when it comes to Hong Kong cinema, particularly since that place is particularly known for gangster triad police movies. Like, that's kind of the bread and butter of Hong Kong cinema, and it is John Woo's A Better Tomorrow. And that has Leslie Chung in it and Zhang Fat in it. And some people consider it kind of like the blueprint for everything that would come after it. It's just one that I've seen it a million times now, that movie. I can't even count how many times I've seen it. And it's not a perfect movie, but it's so much fun. And it's about two brothers. Kind of, one goes the police academy way, the other one not so much. And it's a very, very classic tale of within the gangster genre, but it's done really well. And you see kind of it's one of the, I believe it's the first partnership between John Woo and Chow Yun Fat, as he is known over here. So it's incredible if you haven't seen it already. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this in some other podcast episode, because I do really love it. The actual pick that I'm going for, though, is one that is a pretty new movie. It only came out in 2020. And it is called Septet, which is like seven. It's the story of Hong Kong. And it's an anthology series of 7 short films. And it's from different directors as well. It's from like a bunch of different directors throughout Hong Kong. And they each were assigned a specific decade to make a movie about it. And they're missing, and it starts in the 50s and ends in the 2020s. And it is missing the 70s, which I actually just learned prepping for this I don't know why I didn't notice that the 70s were missing when I watched it. But John Woo was meant to do the 70s, and for whatever reason, he wasn't able to do it. So it's a pretty special movie, especially considering everything that has gone on in Hong Kong from 97 onwards. And it's a nice cinematic kind of historical encompassing of everything that has happened in Hong Kong through the eyes of some of the best filmmakers to come out of Hong Kong. So including Anne Hui, who I absolutely adore. I wish I knew how people could watch it, because it's kind of difficult to watch. If you're ever on a plane in Cathay Pacific, I know that they constantly have that on their entertainment system. And my brother, I know, has seen it many times when he flies. Every time he flies Cathay, he watches it.
Yeah, I've never heard of this movie. I'm looking at the directors, and wow, that is literally like a murderer's row of some of the greatest living Hong Kong directors. That's absolutely incredible.
It's incredible. And I'm not surprised that they were able to get everybody together to do it, because people who are from Hong Kong and live in Hong Kong. They're very proud to be from there specifically. And the filmmakers in particular are very proud and eager to show off the place that they grew up and the place that kind of made them into who they are. Because it is quite a unique part of the world, Hong Kong. So yeah, I would recommend it if I can find a way for people to watch it. I mean, particularly you, I can probably figure it out. But it's not the easiest movie to get a hold of. I have to say, I did watch it on a plane as well.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was also maybe made a bit in response to the fact of how much propaganda movies are made on mainland.
Very much
the fact of like, I know they recently, I forget what the anniversary was, but a couple of years ago, mainland China celebrated some big anniversary.
Oh, the centenary of
and they had so many
yeah.
movies and stuff like that released about it, where it was a year full of propaganda movies.
Yeah, and so July 1, I believe, is their day as well. So I actually remember we did an episode about the the news stories of the year, and Black Widow got kicked out because of these propaganda movies, and Marvel just didn't. I guess they didn't look at the calendar. They didn't understand what was going on. But this movie is absolutely a response to those types of movies, and definitely just a response to what's been going on in Hong Kong. And people are very kind of desperate to preserve the culture and the history of the place because, various reasons that they want to preserve that. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully you're not going to get too mad with my first pick because it is a Mandarin pick. But I think we can all agree that it is a straight up classic, and that is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Yeah, do you have any qualms with me including this?
No, it's a beautiful movie. It's a wonderful, wonderful movie. That and I would say Hero as well. They're gorgeous movies, and I can't hate them. They're amazing.
And it stars Chow Yun-fat, so there's that,
and Michelle Yeoh.
And Michelle Yeoh,
they're incredible. Yeah.
I think pretty much this is if anyone has seen a movie from China, it is probably this one is the one that they had seen. Because it's absolutely incredible. I don't think you need anyone to summarize the impact that this had, the bringing over the wuxia style movie making to North American audiences, Western audiences is something that can't be understated. But my actual pick, if you want to talk about basic picks, I'm going to be real basic here, and that's Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. I'm sticking with the Cantonese choice on that side of things. It is an absolutely stunning film about a man and a woman who believe that their respective partners are having an affair with each other, so they decide to investigate by following them, and in the process of investigating their own partners, they may or may not be falling in love with each other, and then they have to decide what to do with these newfound feelings that they may or may not be feeling. So it's a very tender, delicate movie where you're talking about things like infidelity and love and relationships and all these grandiose emotional things. But then, it also features probably some of the greatest costume design I've ever seen in a movie, bar none. Like Maggie Cheung's dresses, absolutely stunning. And I think she wears something like 80 or 90 dresses in this movie, and each one of them is absolutely gorgeous to look at.
It's like everything about that is one of the most beautiful looking movies ever made. Yeah. I think it's just gorgeous. And it's a great movie. I can't argue. That's one of my favorites of all time. I think it's a stunning movie, and Maggie and Tony are both incredible in it. And I always wanted them to get together in real life, but that's just my own little gossip of that. And they did get together, but we won't get into that. But anyways, the point is, it's a beautiful movie, and Wong Kar-wai, he has so many he's such a gift to Hong Kong cinema, I think. Like, for as much as I love the gangster police shootout movies of John Woo, and I think Hong Kong cinema wouldn't be what it is without him, I think it's lovely that there's somebody like Wong Kar-wai who kind of balances him out a little bit, especially on an international level, because I'd say those are probably the two most well-known. Is that correct? Yeah, probably two most well-known Chinese directors.
I would probably say so.
in the world anyways. And it's a beautiful, beautiful movie, and a really quite a devastating piece of storytelling, really. It's quite sad, but it's kind of beautiful in its sadness, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let us move on to now our region picks. So the first region we're going to talk about is the Middle East. So I'm going to quickly run over. You could have picked a movie that came from any one of these countries, which is Algeria, Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, Oman, Palestine, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Tunisia, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. So obviously a bunch of these countries don't really produce movies of any kind whatsoever, so you can cross out easily about half of them. It's kind of shocking when like you can go on Letterboxd and look on the world map, and you go, all right, let me just click on one of these random countries, and it'll be like, this country has produced 3 movies ever. Yeah. It's like, oh okay.
You know which country, this is not in our, but like just to kind of your point of country that is surprising that they don't. Pakistan does not make nearly as many movies as I thought they did. I really thought they made quite a bit. They do not make very many movies at all. And I learned that through like doing the Asian cut stuff, where I was like trying to find more Pakistani films, and there just aren't very many. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a shame.
Very, very, very interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, what Middle Eastern language country did you kind of pick, and what were your picks?
So again, very big, because I think of those countries, the most obvious one to go with is Iran, because they make some of the most gorgeous movies. I saw a BBC article, actually. I was going to send it to you. And it's just basically like, why are Iranian movies so good? That's the entire article. It's just, why are they so good? Because it's just, they make such, I think with them is they really focus on storytelling, which I do believe that, I mean, our kind of standard for film in many ways is Hollywood movies, just because that's what we, are the most exposed to. But I feel like we get away from that in Hollywood in terms of like what the focus is. The focus tends to be a lot now these days, especially on like CGI and effects and, you know, action set pieces and blah, 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 blah. But I found Iranian movies, they always are very, very focused on just the story and character. And I really appreciate that. So, my runner-up officially is a movie called Close Up, which is by Abbas Kiarostami, who is probably the most revered Iranian director or Persian director.
I would say so. He's probably right up there.
I think so. And so this was gonna be my number one pick, because it is my favorite movie, and it's about a man who impersonates a filmmaker and is basically defrauding people into taking part in his movie. And it's kind of his, I don't know if it's his first movie, but I know it's the movie that really, really elevated his profile. And the reason I watched it was because he directed a movie, an English and French movie called Certified Copy. And I adore that movie. And then I was like, who is this Abbas Kiarostami? And then turns out he is a very prolific director. So I felt kind of foolish about that. But A Close Up is, I think, one of his, if not, like, it was his big breakout movie, and it's definitely one that he's very, very well known for. So that's worth to check out. But my official pick, because we're being very official here, is a really new movie. Actually, it just came out last year, and I saw it during TIFF last year. And I'm not saying in any way is this movie better than Close Up. It is called Subtraction, and it's directed by Mani Hajiji. And the reason I'm picking it is the director, Mani Hajiji, he came to Toronto and talked, and he's had like all sorts of kind of political issues, going back to Iran, leaving Iran, those kinds of, like, his passport was taken away from him, I believe, when he was in the UK and all this kind of stuff. And it was coming from a time where Iran's censorship of the types of movies they were going to be able to show, and just generally like the media censorship in the country as a whole was really under attack. But he kept kind of forging on. And so I think that's why I kind of put it, it's not a good reason to put it at number one, but it just, like, I have a bit of a kind of a hold over this movie now, because it just makes me think of that, like, where we kind of watch a movie and you just think, yeah, it's a fun movie and it's a great movie. But then there's a lot of times, especially countries like Iran, that have quite a bit of political issues going on in the country, that it's not always such an easy process in making your movie and distributing it and having it go out there. So Subtraction is about it's kind of like Enemy, actually. It's kind of got like an Enemy vibe in terms of like doppelgangers and things like that. And it's about a woman who has a doppelganger in Tehran, and it's a bit of a thriller, kind of a psychological noir, that kind of vibe to it. And I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great movie, aside from all of the political stuff that is going on with the director. But I also picked Subtraction because I believe it's actually fairly easy in Canada to watch it right now, because I think it's available on digital starting like 2 weeks ago. So yeah, go check it out.
I have not seen any Kiarostami movies, and I have not seen or even heard of Subtraction. So once again, this is now the point of teaching people and adding it to the list. And I'm looking up Subtraction on Letterboxd, and there is a review from someone I follow named Andrew Pope, who says, writing Enemy on a whiteboard, looking over my shoulder at the execs, then adding an S at the end, then turning the S into a $sign. They start to cheer. It's set in Iran, I say. The execs all produce bottles of champagne and start popping corks. Cinema.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly what it is. It's a great movie though. Like it's very moody, and it kind of loses its way a little bit towards the end, but I really enjoyed it. I think it's a very, very compelling watch. But if you haven't seen any of the Kiarostami movies though, watch Certified Copy. I think you'd really enjoy that one. That's like such a Dakota movie, and we can talk about it because I love that movie. But it's a very, very you movie.
All right, so moving on to my picks. My runner-up is also from Iran, because that's a very easy place to mine great movies from, and that is A Separation, the Asghar Farhadi movie, which was his big international breakthrough. It won Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars when it came out. He ended up winning back-to-back Best Foreign Language Oscars on consecutive years, but for consecutive films. And it's a very, you talked about this. I would say Iranian films are just about the human condition, and that's really what it's about. Yeah. And it's about a married couple who decide to get a divorce. That is literally the plot. And so they're going through the process of getting a divorce, and it's tricky because they still love each other. They still have feelings for each other. They understand that they're maybe not the best people to be together for, but they've got a teenage daughter who they want to get out of the country, but they can't because the father wants to stay and help his sick father. And so he won't leave Iran, and the mother wants to. So they decide they should get a divorce. And that is basically the entire plot of this movie, of will they or will they not get a divorce, and the reasoning behind it, and the barriers put in place by the Iranian government, and how, despite the fact that the husband is being supportive of the wife, the government in the respective agencies do not respect or support women. So you get to deal with all that fun stuff that comes with being a woman that lives in the Middle East. Beautiful, heartbreaking story, fantastically acted. It plays like a thriller, even though it is a story about divorce. Great film. But my actual pick is one from just a couple of years ago as well, and that was called Capernaum, which is a Lebanese film directed by Nadine Labaki, about a young boy who decides to sue his parents for birthing him, basically. This is a great film. He's a 12-year-old boy, and he becomes the sort of primary caregiver for his family because they have a lot of kids, and his parents are deadbeats, especially his father, who won't earn money. So what happens when a 12-year-old is forced to be the breadwinner for an entire family, and the expectations that sort of come along with that? And so he runs away from home and ends up befriending a whole bunch of different people, migrants, menial workers, all this sort of stuff. It's a gorgeous film, very interesting. At one point, he ends up going to jail, and that's when he's suing his parents. Very, very interesting movie. If you have not seen this, watch it. It's beautiful, it's hilarious, it's heartbreaking, it's all that great stuff that I feel like I keep saying over and over again.
Well, that's what happens when it's a list of things that we love, and it's just a list of movies that we really like. But that I haven't seen that. That sounds hilarious, and I like what you said about Iranian movies. And I mean, I know you're talking about a Lebanese film, but I think generally speaking, maybe I shouldn't just paint them both with such a broad stroke, but movies that like just look at the human condition, I find that really, really fascinating, and I think that they do it really well there. And maybe it's a bit of a constraint of budget as well, because they don't have the massive budgets that they do in Hollywood that you can kind of get away with. So that movie sounds very funny though, and I will be watching it. I will add that to my list. It will be a very cultured weekend for me.
Very nice. Okay, so the next region we are going to cover is the Nordic, which means you can pick a movie from the following countries: Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. So you got some really big heavy hitters here, so I'm really curious to see what you go with, Rachel.
So my runner-up is a movie called The Emigrants, and it's from Sweden, and I believe it's from 1971. And it's kind of not a funny story, but it's like an interesting story behind how I even found this movie. Was after I watched Midsommar, I got really into like what was going on in Sweden, because I thought that's funny, even though it's not a Swedish movie. Like, it's a very, very American movie. But I was curious what Swedish people thought about Midsommar. And so I went to the Sweden subreddit, basically, and I asked that question. I was like, what do you guys all think of Midsommar? And I got some really interesting answers. And then there were a ton of people who are like, yeah, like this movie is better and that movie is better. So then I eventually was just like, oh, can you guys give me recommendations for different Swedish movies? And I got a ton of them. And actually, a lot of them were pretty easy to find. But this one was one of the first ones that I watched, and I found it fascinating. It's quite an epic movie. It's an epic family drama. It's set in a time where Sweden's economy is really not doing very well. It's very opposite to the Sweden that we know today, and that we look at them and most of the Nordic countries as being very developed, and because of the socialist nature of it all. But this was a time when, their country wasn't doing very well, and there were people who were in very, very severe poverty, and so there was a huge migration out of Sweden to go to the U.S. and live the American dream. And the thing that I found really kind of amusing about this movie is that it's a very moving drama, and it's very kind of epic in scope, but there's a certain humor that these guys have that I very much so enjoy. And the whole idea was like they're working towards this like finish line for them in the movie, and it's they're moving to America, and it's going to be this brilliant thing, and they all have like visions of just the greatest place on earth, and they end up in Minnesota of all places. And I find
there's a lot of Swedes there.
Like it's such like a funny Swedish way of doing things. But this was one of those movies that was recommended to me on Reddit, and I really enjoyed it. I can't remember how long. It's not that long, because I remember some of the Swedish movies that I got recommended were super, super long. There was one that was like 5 hours long. I was like, I don't have the time to watch 5-hour movies.
This is 192 minutes. It's still pretty long.
It's pretty long, but like not in comparison to 5 hours. Like their movies are just lengthy, but this is a great one, and was a real kind of gem that I wouldn't have ever found it if it hadn't been for me being curious about what Swedish people thought about Midsommar. So thank you, Ari Aster, for that one.
So I've actually heard of this movie because it was nominated for 5 Oscars, and it stars probably the 2 biggest Swedish actors ever, Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann. And so I heard about this on the Best Actress podcast, where they covered it when they did the 1973 year, because Liv Ullmann was nominated for Best Actress.
Absolutely recommend it. It's a good one. I love this idea that they're like, they go to Minnesota of all like places. It's like, they go to Minnesota. My actual pick though is another recent movie, and it's from Denmark, and it's called Speak No Evil, and the director is Christian Taftrup. I watched this during, I want to say Sundance. Maybe not Sundance. Maybe it was TIFF. I can't remember. I watched it. No, it's for Sundance. I'm pretty sure. I think I watched it for Sundance. And I was just blown away by this movie. It's such a interesting film that kind of talks about political correctness in a very twisted way. It's about 2 couples who go on vacation together, and one is just super polite. Like they're just such a polite couple, and they never want to do anything wrong. They don't want to offend anybody. But the other couple is clearly something is very wrong with them. And they're a little bit twisted in the head. But the other couple just doesn't act to their sensibilities and just be like, we should leave, because they have every opportunity to leave the cabin that they're all staying in together. But they never do. And it ends up kind of unraveling into this pretty grimy horror movie. And I just really loved it. Like, there was a lot of humor, like very twisted humor in it. And I I'll mention it. I didn't direct it. I interviewed the director and I had a really great conversation with him about this movie. And I just think it's I always find it interesting when twisted movies come out of countries that are seemingly like very well put together, like a Denmark. We kind of expect them to just be, sane people. But it's a messed up movie and I love it. It's everything I like in a horror movie. You would not like this movie. I'm just going to put that out there. You would find it just a bit too much.
Yeah, I haven't even heard of that one. My picks. The first one I've got is from Denmark, and that is the Thomas Vinterberg movie, The Hunt, which
very nice.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a popular one among people. This is about a male teacher who gets accused of a inappropriate interaction with one of his female students, and who I believe he's like a kindergarten teacher or something like that. And we know that it is a false accusation right from the get-go, but we see everything that sort of transpires where you are dealing with all the issues that come with what would we call it? Misuses of power, sexual misconduct, all this sort of stuff, abuse of children, all this really heady things. It's a really frustrating, infuriating movie to watch because we know literally from the get-go that this did not happen, that this young girl made up this accusation because she was just mad at her teacher one day and seeing how this could potentially destroy his life. Not an easy watch for sure, but it really is an eye-opening one. And it's a type of movie where, on the surface, you're like, yes, I'm going to make a movie about how a man is falsely accused of sexually assaulting a child. And you're like, oh, that does not sound like something I want to watch. But, when you cast Mads Mikkelsen in it, it becomes a little bit more palatable. It is still a very difficult watch, though. And then my actual pick is one from Norway, and that is a movie that just came out 2 years ago, and that is The Worst Person in the World, directed by Joachim Trier. Absolutely love this movie. It is about a woman who is basically just navigating her life and dealing with her in different relationships, partners, trying to get her career off the ground, figuring out who she is as a person, all this sort of stuff. And you do find out who the worst person in the world refers to. It is not the title character, but also features some of the most imaginative sequences I have seen in recent years. Most people have probably seen the sequence where she's able to freeze time and sort of run through the city streets and everything is frozen. But there are some fantastic other sequences in this, and also has some ridiculously romantic and horny moments, and probably the horniest cigarette smoking I've seen in quite a long time. Makes you want to pick up smoking watching this movie. This is just a stunning movie. You let out some sort of exasperated breath.
I can't believe I didn't think about that one. That absolutely would have been. I'd like my pick too, but I love that movie. I really do. I genuinely like. It is one of my top of the last 10 some odd years. Like, it's one of those movies that I adored it when I was watching it. And then when I finished watching it, I wanted to watch it again. I think I ended up watching it like a day later. I watched it again. It's such a good movie. It's such a good movie. And I'm so glad, because I remember it when it came out, like over here, it kind of exploded from award season. Like, it was one of those movies that just picked up so much steam during award season because people just started to watch it and discovering it. And I could be wrong, but I think it debuted at TIFF. I feel like it was like a TIFF movie. And I remember hearing a lot about it from the film festival circuit. Like, I know it had done the rounds and stuff like that, but I hadn't seen it. And then when I finally got around to watching it, it blew me away. I love that movie so much. I'm so annoyed mad. I didn't think about that.
I'm so mad it was up against Drive My Car that year for Best International Feature, because that was probably two of the greatest films in the past decade, and like they had to compete against each other.
I feel like that year wasn't like Flea also in there as well?
That was the year, where you absolutely adored that one.
I love that, but like that was such a tricky year for international films. Because that was, I remember that year, like that category was the most interesting category of any of the ones at the Oscars that year. Wow. I forgot that came out at the same time. Yeah, that's a great movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the nominees were Drive My Car, Flea, The Worst Person in the World, Hand of God, which was the latest Paulo Sorrentino movie, which I was pretty mixed on, and then a film from Bhutan called Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom, which was actually a very adorable movie.
And I was fascinated with that one because that didn't come out that year. Like it came out years before, but because of many different reasons, it didn't qualify yet. So that was a good year. That was a good year for that category.
Yeah. Okay. So let us move on. We are now in our wildcard section. So we're going to do 3 wildcards so that way we can kind of fill in some gaps and spread the love a bit more. So the first one is we're going to pick an African wildcard. So you can pick any movie that has been produced by an African country, as long as it is not, French, which, you can do that if you're talking about like Cote d'Ivoire or certain other areas. I guess there's some, I guess that's really the only language you need to worry about
English.
Duplicates.
There are English movies as well.
English as well, yes, which is obviously not allowed. So what are your African picks?
So my runner-up is a South African movie that does have English in it. But the main language is Afrikaan, though. But I know they do speak English a little bit in it. But it's a movie called Mafi. And it was one of the ones I mentioned right at the top of kind of going into this weird tailspin of South African cinema, because I just happened to come across a number of movies over here that I really enjoyed. So I started to look into more South African cinema, and this was one that kept coming up, and it's directed by Oliver Hermanus, who did Living, which both of us really enjoyed. Mafi is a war drama, and it takes a look at homosexuality and just kind of queer, how queerness is accepted and not accepted in South African culture. And it's a really, really interesting movie. It's another one of those, it's not the easiest to watch. Like there are some uncomfortable moments in it, but I really enjoyed it. And I think it's pretty incredible. And if you enjoyed Living, like Oliver Hermanus is quite the director. And this one it's not the same as Living, obviously, but you can kind of get the same vibe-ish. So that's my runner-up. My actual pick is another recent movie, and it is called Saloom. And when this came out at TIFF, I kind of wouldn't shut up about it. It's the only one from, like, when you're in TIFF, you only have a certain amount of time to watch movies, and you really shouldn't be wasting your time rewatching a movie. But this was the year that TIFF was completely virtual. So you're just at home. And even though the movies did expire at some point, and there were other movies that I needed to watch, I think I watched Saloom 3 times in the window of TIFF, which was not a good use of my time, but it was a good use of my time because I love this movie. It is like a crime, horror, supernatural, psychological thriller. It's a lot of things, and it's about these mercenary kind of groups, and they end up in this island called Saloom, and there's kind of I don't want to say a ghost story aspect, but basically for the leader of the mercenary group, some bits from his past kind of come back up, whether it's intentionally or not. And it's just an incredible movie. I love it. And everybody I know that has seen it falls in love with it too. And the word that kept getting thrown around describing this movie was kinetic, which is usually it's usually a word that and like dynamic are the 2 movie descriptors that I use them a lot, mind you, but I kind of roll my eyes at a little bit. But this movie really is kinetic. It really is. And I love it. I love it so, so much. And I was very happy when I heard like it did eventually kind of get a bit of a release, not as big as I had hoped it would, but it was, it eventually made it onto Shudder, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can watch on Shudder now. Yeah, I have not seen either of your picks. I do remember you talking about Mafi. I don't remember I guess it was probably when we did our living episode, we did the make remake of that. That was probably where it came up when we were talking about Hermanus there. And one I forgot about, but you have now rejogged me to want to watch it. But yeah, Saloom is one I've also wanted to watch, and I have a screener link. I believe I still have it where I could watch it if I want to. But yeah, I've not gotten around to that one either.
It's a lot of movies to watch, to be fair. It's a lot of movies.
A lot, yeah. Okay, so for my picks, I did talk about how I'm going to be cheating, not cheating. How French was kind of the one language that we sort of had to avoid, because that's probably the most prominent colonized language that is spoken in France. But both of my movies have a little bit of French in them. So my first one is actually a Canadian film called War Witch, which takes place in the Congo. And it is both French and in Lingala, which is the local language spoken in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it is about a 14-year-old girl who is explaining her life story to her unborn baby in her pregnant stomach, how she talks about that she was kidnapped by rebel groups and forced to be a war witch for them, which literally would mean that the leader would say, how am I going to do in battle? And she would have to prophesize what was going to happen. And if she was wrong, then she would be killed. And if she lied, she would be killed. So basically, or she had to figure out a way to, yes. So this is a very brutal and hard to watch movie at times, because you are dealing with child soldiers. And it's, all that sort of tough stuff that goes on, and the fact that it's happening to a child makes it even more difficult. But yeah, this is a very, very powerful movie. It was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. The Oscars the year it came out back in 2012. But yeah, very, very interesting and beautiful movie. But my actual pick is one called Timbuktu, which is where's this from? So it is actually a French movie, but it takes place, I forget where Timbuktu takes place. I wish I had that up in front of me right now, but I don't. But it is French and Arabic, but also Bambara is the local language of that. And this is a very beautiful movie where you have a family that kind of lives in the middle of the desert. They are cattle herders. They kind of live a small, peaceful life. But slowly, jihadist groups are taking over town by town. So think ISIS and the likes of that, where they're putting fundamental laws in place, Sharia law as we know it. And sort of how is impacting it. So it's going on in all these different towns. And so all these people that live out in the middle of the desert are like, hey, you know what? This really sucks. Unfortunately, there isn't really anything I can do, but I live out on my own. They should leave us alone and hopefully it's fine. Unfortunately, that's not how reality works. And slowly, this jihadist mercenary group starts infiltrating the countryside as well, the desert side, and how it is impacting their day-to-day life. And it's also a tough movie to watch at times, but also a very beautiful and unique movie where you sort of really get to see how other parts of the world live their day-to-day lives.
I haven't seen either of those. I really need to check them out though, because they sound really very engrossing and things that I think I would enjoy. Like depressing stuff, which is what I tend to like to watch. So, but yeah, they both sound really incredible.
Yeah, it was Timbuktu was a movie that was also nominated for an Oscar, and so that's the reason why I saw it. But yeah, it says it's a French movie, but I don't remember what country it actually takes place in. What country is Timbuktu in? Mali. So it is a city in Mali. So that is where Timbuktu takes place. So that's where this movie takes place in.
I had no idea it was in Mali. Isn't it funny because Timbuktu is a thing we say it a lot. Remember when you're a kid? And I don't know why Timbuktu is a place that every child knows but doesn't know at the same time. We just know the word.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to our next wildcard pick, and that is an Asian wildcard pick. So the rule for this is you wouldn't be able to choose a Japanese or a Cantonese or Mandarin. Well, I guess you could technically choose a Mandarin film because you didn't earlier pick one, or a Middle Eastern language film, whatever one you chose. You chose 2 Iranian films, 2 Farsi films, so that would be your limitation. So what are your picks there, Rachel?
So I actually, I can't choose between these two, if I'm honest. Like, I know I'm supposed to do runner-up in this, and I can't choose between the two, and I refuse to. I absolutely refuse to. I ended up choosing a Mandarin, or you could say Taiwanese, film, or language film. And it is a Taiwan film, and it is by Edward Yang, who is an incredible director. And it is a movie called, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because my Mandarin's really terrible. But it is like, it's 1-1, EE. And it's the number one. It's kind of, the idea is 1-2, because in Chinese, when you write 1 is just a dash, like a horizontal line, and 2 is 2 dashes above each other. So the idea was it was supposed to be like 1-2. I think that's what they were going for. But it is a movie about a middle-class family in Taipei. And it just goes through a year of that family, basically. And it starts with a wedding, ends with a funeral. It's very moving and devastating and lovely and heartfelt and joyous, and at times funny as well. It's a gorgeous movie. It's I think one of the greatest things to come out of Taiwan. Taiwan has a great history of cinema as well. I think Taiwanese cinema is pretty amazing and gets overlooked quite often. And Edward Yang is probably one of the best to have done it out of that country. So I took the opportunity for my Asian wildcard to go over to Taiwan and enjoy their films, because I do really, really love their films. And I don't think that, I hate to say this, I don't know if this is the best movie out of Taiwan, because that's a big statement to make, but it's certainly one of the best movies to ever come out of Taiwan. And if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend anybody go and watch it, because it's very, very moving. The other pick, I'm not going to say it's my actual pick, is kind of I guess they're both kind of basic picks, to be honest, but I'm going with Old Boy from South Korea. I really love this movie. It's kind of got everything that I like in action movies. There are some pretty incredible action sequences. There's one where they're just like in a hallway, and it's shot, I believe they say it's like a oneer, like it's a one take thing. And it's so good. The story is really twisted. It's Park Chan-wook. It's, I don't even know how to, it's a man, the movie, most people I think listening to this have probably already watched Old Boy. But it's a man, like, it's a man who we find him in prison, and you don't really know why he's there. And the movie, it basically unravels to figure out what happened to him to get him to that point. Because one day he's just kind of randomly released back into society. It's an incredible movie, and it will be the one that Park Chan-wook is most known for, and for very, very good reason. And it's, to me, one of the perfect kind of coalescence of action and just great psychological thriller storytelling.
Yeah, Old Boy is absolutely fantastic, and one of the greatest twist movies anyone will ever see.
One of the greatest action movies too, I'd say. I put
that too. You see it all the time. Anytime you see a fight that takes place in a hallway, it's because they're directly referencing Old Boy.
Absolutely. That and The Raid, I think, are the two greatest action movies to come out in very recent times. And I don't say that lightly, because I love action movies.
Yeah. I have not seen Yi. I have not seen any Edward Yang movies, and he's probably one of my biggest blind spots. Between Yi and A Brighter Summer Day are, two of the best movies ever made that I have not gotten around to watching yet. So he is high up on my list.
I believe they're on Criterion as well. Like I know Yi is at the minimum. I know that one is for sure. But yeah, because they love him over at Criterion for obvious reasons. They love him though. Yeah. But yeah, I think you'd actually really, really like that movie. I think that would be very much so one up your street. Unlike Speak No Evil.
I appreciate that you know my tastes. All right, so for my Asian wild card, I forgot about Korea, and that was because originally. Yes, I did. Originally, I had a list of about like 12 or so different languages. And so I had a Korean section and I had some picks. And then when I was trying to narrow it down and spread it, because I felt we were getting a little too European and a little too East Asian centric.
Yeah.
So I wanted to diversify it a little bit. And so then I considered a category of East Asian, which would have been China, Hong Kong, Japan, Macau, Mongolia, North Korea, South Korea, and Taiwan. North Korea doesn't actually produce movies, at least none that we know about. But it counts as East Asia. And so it was put in there, and then we decided not to do East Asia. We just did a Asian Wildcard, and I forgot about moving my Korean picks over. But I'm still very happy with my picks. So my runner-up is a movie from Turkey, and that is Mustang. I don't know if you've seen that movie,
I haven't, no.
But it is a fantastic movie. It is a story about these 5 orphan sisters who live under very strict rules from their parents, not their parents, from their caregivers. I think it's their grandparents they live with. And about how as they range from late teens to preteens, basically, so they're all fairly close in age, and how once they get to a certain age, they need to be married off, because that is what happens in Turkey. You need to find a man to take care of you. So this is about how each of these 5 sisters are slowly growing up, and one by one they are getting married off, and how it affects their relationships with each other and their opinions and their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, especially the youngest ones who really sort of see it for what it is and living in a patriarchal society and want to change their outcome, whereas their older sisters sort of realize this is unfortunately just a way of life and we need to make the best situation of it as we can. So it is a heavy movie because you're dealing with themes of patriarchy and feminism and the lack of agency that women have, especially young girls have, but also is a very hopeful and beautiful movie, as well as these young women are trying to figure out how to take control of their lives. So it is a great movie and a lot of fun to watch, even if it deals with some pretty heavy subject matter. But my actual pick is an Indian film, and I'm going with Padar Panchali, the classic Satyajit Ray film that is the first in a trilogy, the Apu trilogy that he released over a course of about a decade. And this first one came out in 1955. And it is literally about a couple with a young son and figuring out how to make their lives better because they live in a rural poor part of the country, and due to their caste system have trouble moving up in their lives. And it sort of goes back to this neo-realism sort of style of movie where it is just, very matter-of-factly look at life, and especially the look at the life of people who have very little for themselves. It is a stunningly beautiful movie, and I still actually haven't seen the second 2 movies. I can't remember what the second one is, but the third one is called World of Apu. That as the trilogy goes on, it focuses more on the young son as he is growing up in life. And eventually the third one is when he's an adult. So yeah, I don't know if you've seen either of these movies, Rachel.
I haven't. And, it's very appropriate that you were talking about like the list becoming very East Asian centric. And that's something I'm very guilty of doing, and something that with the Asian Cut, we try really, really hard to include as much from other Asian countries as possible, because I know my own taste, and like I kind of may naturally gravitate towards like more East Asian films, and that shouldn't be the case because there's some amazing movies in Bollywood in particular. They make a ridiculous amount of movies every year. Not all of them are great, I'm sure, because you can't make that many and have them all great, but they have some real classics in there. And one thing that I've really enjoyed kind of discovering that was trying to watch more Bollywood movies. So I'm going to add that one to my actually the whole series. Why not? I'll put all 3. How long is this one? Their movies are
I don't think it's that.
Okay.
I don't think it's that long.
I know their movies are very long. I love that.
Yeah, it's 125 minutes for the first one, so it's a 2-hour movie.
That's okay. I can do that. I love that you picked a Turkish movie though as well, because Turkey is not a country that I know too much about their cinema. Another very, very big blind spot for me, and I find Turkey as a country and just like their history and their culture is very, very fascinating. So I should definitely watch more movies from them because they seem to have a good sensibility when it comes to telling stories and what kind of stories they want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're now on to our last pick, and it is the European Wildcard. So I know we were just talking about how it was very Eurocentric, and we're going to kind of finish that off with keeping it back to being Eurocentric. So Rachel, what are your picks for your European Wildcards?
So my runner-up is a movie that I have been harping on about for a little while, and it's called Apples. I think I just talked about it in last week's episode too. Actually.
I'm pretty sure you did, yes.
I really love this movie. It's from Greece. It's directed by Christos Nikou? I don't know.
Bill, I hope you send in a note of how this is pronounced.
Help me out with this one. It's Nikou is the surname. And yeah, hey, Bill, see, I'm picking a Greek movie for Bill. No, it's not for Bill. I just really love this movie. And it's, I think I described it last week, but I'll describe it again. It is about a man. Actually, it's about a time, where it seems that amnesia, there's kind of an epidemic of amnesia, of people just forgetting. They end up in the hospital, and when nobody is able to collect them, no family members are looking for them. And that might not be because they are lonely or they are by themselves, but it could be because their family members have also lost their memory and just don't know what's going on. The state has created a program that is attempting to get people to either try to remember their past lives, or really just to move on and just to kind of be able to live again and just carry on with their lives. Basically, it's such a great movie. I was just so moved by it the first time I saw it, and it's just one that has really, really stuck with me since I think I saw it last year, and it's one that I've been recommending to many people. And clearly, I don't stop talking about it on this podcast, so I will stop now. My actual pick, though, for this one is going to be a German movie from the 1930s, and it's called M, and it is directed by Fritz Lang. It's like a movie that is for movie lovers to nerd over, because it's got some pretty terrific moments in terms of sound in particular. Like it really innovated.
The use of music is incredible.
Yeah, it's technically speaking, it's an incredible movie to like break it down and really understand the innovations that Lang was employing in this movie. But then if you just look at it as a movie, just as storytelling, Peter Lorre is in it, and he plays a child serial killer. And what a movie. It's so scary without being scary. Like, they never show violence. They never show a child in actual danger, but it's happening. And so he plays a lot with tension and with our expectations, and with our like creating what we create in our minds is much worse than anything that they would have been able to show us. And there's like a long, I don't want to say it's a gag because that makes it sound comedic, but there's like a thing in the movie where it's the whistle of Peter Lorre's character. He's whistling, and that's kind of how danger is afoot, basically. And yeah, it's a classic film for a very, very good reason. And it's one that I haven't watched it in a couple years. And actually, when I was putting this list together, I was like, I should really watch this again because I really, really love it. It's a genre that I enjoy a lot. And when you read about it, like every time I go to read about this movie, I discover something new about it, even though it's been a movie that's been around for almost 100 years now. But yeah, it's incredible. It's a good film nerd movie.
Yeah. Great pick there with that one. I still haven't seen Apples since last week when we talked about it. So my picks, it's interesting. I put two movies that I cannot pick, and they were both German movies because as my main pick, and I'll reveal that later, but they are The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which technically is a silent film, but originally in German, so that's why I'm including that, was my pick for the 1920s when I did my decades list, and M was my 1930s pick. I went back-to-back German movies there. Nice. Yeah, but my runner-up movie is a Polish film from a couple of years ago called Cold War, directed by Paweł Pawlikowski. Great movie. He's made a couple really fantastic movies. Ida's another one if you haven't seen it, but this is about in the 1950s, as the rise of communism is taking hold in Poland, post-World War II, as the Soviet Union is kind of spreading its Iron Curtain around, a music director and a singer fall in love, but they just cannot be together because the forces of life keep separating them, and the forces of life being communism. Beautiful, beautiful black and white movie, stunning to look at, stunning performances. It is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's just a tragic love story that is so wonderful. But then my actual pick, which as I alluded to, is a German movie, and one that we have done a podcast episode about, and that is Nosferatu the Vampire, which was the Werner Herzog remake of the classic horror movie Nosferatu, which is a take on Dracula. I love the classic Nosferatu. It is so good, especially what they did for the time. Still holds up today. But I loved, and we talked about this a lot on that podcast episode, how Herzog was able to keep everything that is great from that original movie, but expand it and make it better. And having the cast that he does to really sort of bring it home. You've got some of the greatest actors from this era: Klaus Kinski, Isabella Gianni. Shout out to Alex Watson, who that's his favorite actress. Bruno Ganz. You know, it's just a fantastic movie. And like, go back and listen to our Nosferatu's episode where we cover 3 different versions of Nosferatu. It's sort of like a remake episode, and you can hear us gush about that movie even more.
I had a guess that you were going to choose Nosferatu for this. I had a guess that it was. You know what? I don't think I've ever said this to you. That episode, I loved vampire stuff growing up. Like, it was always, everyone has like a monster, I think, that they kind of gravitate towards. And I loved the story of Dracula, but I kind of hadn't really thought about it in a long time. But then that episode kind of reinvigorated that in me. And now I can't stop watching and like looking for vampire stuff.
Yeah.
Films, like books and things like that. And oddly, there's like more vampire stuff that comes out than you realize. Like, I think there's there's Renfield obviously this year, and then there's going to be another one sometime down. There's another one this year. I can't remember what it's called, but there's another vampire movie coming, and I'm very excited for it. So,
well, there's basically going to be a version of Nosferatu called The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which is basically distilling, distilling the story to the ship ride over from Transylvania to England. Does he go to? I can't remember.
I think so.
Where it's basically just talking about, you know, what happens when Dracula is on a ship, and from the perspective of the people on the ship, and that sort of stuff. So I'm mildly excited about that one too. I am probably going to watch that.
I'll definitely watch it. I loved all those Dracula movies, even the one that you really didn't like from the 90s. I loved that one.
It was fine.
I can't remember the name of it now. As much as I did love it, like, I really enjoyed watching it. I just remember William Dafoe acting like crazy. He's crazy.
I forget what it's called too. I'll link to that show in the show notes as well. So there we go. Those are our picks for best movies by language. It was hard to come up with these picks because, you know, we talked about earlier, we're dealing with both a lack of exposure to some regions and wanting to have good picks as well. So it was a little tough at times, but I think we came up with 2 really great lists, and I love the discussion that we just had.
Same. And like, I'll say it again, if anybody listening has picks for us from these ones, or even like other parts of the world that we didn't cover, although I think we did a pretty good job of covering the Gambit, please send them our way, because I'm always growing that to watch list. I mean, it never feels like it's ever going to be finished. Like, I will never get to the end of that list, but it's fine. I like adding to it. And so please send in your recommendations.
Yes. All right. So I think that wraps us up for today. Rachel, where can people find you, and what have you been working on?
I'm on Twitter at @RachelKH, and Threads, since we were talking about that before. _RachelKH for social media stuff, and RachelHo.com has all of the stuff in there. What do I have going on? Oh, Joyride is out this weekend, and I directed. I keep saying I directed. I interviewed the director, Adele Lim, for Joyride, and I did that for the Asian cut, so you can find that over there. And I also did a review of the movie for Exclaim. And spoiler alert, I really loved it. It's a fun movie. It's a gross movie, but it's fun.
Are you promoting the movie that objectifies men and targets white people?
It's the greatest review I've ever read for a movie.
The amount of people, if you don't know, there's this ridiculous Twitter person who called that movie that, and then basically every reply was like, oh, does it? Oh, great. I'm going to go see this movie now. Thank you.
Adele Lim retweeted it and was like, can we get this on a t-shirt? Like, can we get it on a t-shirt?
Objectifies men and targets white people.
It's amazing. It's such a ridiculous movie, but it is genuinely like, it's good. It's quite good. Like, I really, really loved it. And I had a great time watching it. I think it's going to be a good like theater movie. It is gross. Like it is a very R-rated movie. I'll put that out there. But it's a very fun one.
Nice. Well, this has been a That Shelf podcast. You can visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. You can follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Threads as well, at contrazoompod. What are your favorite movies by language? We've said it several times. Please send us your picks. And specifically, Bill, if you feel left out, send us yours. I would love to read them out.
Please.
Because you probably have a better list than both of us combined.
Definitely.
Send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.